everybody. Thank you for being here. We have our second talk of the day here for the Computer Museum. For this afternoon's talk, we have Steve Garan, who is a Waterloo alumnus and is now a professor at University of California, Berkeley. Is that correct? Researcher at University of California, Berkeley. Director of the Aging Research Center.
Yep.
Just trying to get rid of aging. It's a good plan.
Trying to slow
Can
down.
you assume?
I'm really working hard, I can tell you that. Yeah, go ahead, yeah. Actually, we'll talk about that. I also am CTO of Trans Time, which is in San Leandro, California, where we actually freeze people in liquid nitrogen. So look at Trans Time. Not that I'm advertising, but yeah, go ahead, sorry.
So, yeah, we're excited to have these talks, and then be about half an hour or so plus questions, and then we'll let people get back at playing with the hardware that we have here. So, without further ado, I'll turn this over to Steve, who will give us his insights on Silicon Valley and how it became that.
All right, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to this lecture. I'm hoping you're going to learn a little bit from this. I certainly did, and I've been in Silicon Valley since 1995. So from pretty much the beginning of the internet, the World Wide Web, all that stuff, so I pretty much saw that whole thing happen. But a lot of what pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about is obviously way before then. I'm going to stop around 1979. And by the way, if Lawrence likes this one, I have a second part you might want to invite me back to. But at least it'll give you the foundations of Silicon Valley. And there's a lot of things that I was, again, really surprised to find out myself. And what you think of how it started, I'm pretty sure is wrong, because actually, again, I'll cover it in my lecture. So let's get started. So before I, again, let's say one more thing. So what RIM, or BlackBerry, did to the Waterloo region, imagine multiplying that by 1,000. Okay, so that's what happened in Silicon Valley, and maybe more. All right, so I think we're familiar with some of these companies and places. NASA Ames, SRI, which is the Stanford Research Institute, where this thing called the mouse and the Windows protocol and a bunch of other things were discovered. Then Xerox PARC ripped them off, then Steve Jobs ripped those off, and then Bill Gates ripped off Steve Jobs. So it's pretty much a cycle of borrowing technology. Hewlett Packard, Xerox PARC, NVIDIA, Google, Facebook, Fairchild, which not too many of you know, I'm sure Intel and Apple. So these are just a few of the companies that are out there, and these are like multi-billion, and some of them are multi-trillion-dollar companies. So let's get started. So in the beginning, and I found this one out, what I'm about to show you next, not too long ago. There was the Valley of Heart's Delight. Okay, so it wasn't called Silicon Valley, it was called the Valley of Heart's Delight. And why was that? Well, because there were lots of fruit trees and oranges and so on and so forth. So pretty much it was all agricultural, okay? And an amazing statistic, a majority of America's dried fruit came from Silicon Valley back in the day. And so, you know, this is kind of what we did back about a little over 100 years ago or so. And these were the big companies. These were the Googles, and these were the Hewlett Packards, the NVIDIAs of Silicon Valley back in the day, right? I'm sure, again, well, Delmonte, I'm sure you're familiar with. You can see that on the grocery shelves, but the other ones are kind of obscure and gone by now. So yeah, again, it was this big fruit producer, dried fruit, almonds, all kinds of things like that. Everything was great, you know, everything was happy. People, you know, you could buy a house for like $10,000, not so much anymore, at least in Palo Alto. Check real estate prices there, they're a bit higher than that. But change was ahead. And so it kind of all started off, the ball really got rolling, and a lot of things kind of happened very quickly. But I think kind of the first thing that really happened, which had a lot of influence later on in Silicon Valley, was the Department of the Navy decided to create something called the Moffett Field, where they have these big dirigibles, these big balloons, things like that, kind of like the Hindenburg. And that would eventually become NASA Ames, which also contributed a lot to Silicon Valley's success and so on and so forth. So here's the outside of the facility as it looks today. But again, in the 1930s, it pretty much looked like this basically. Okay, so moving on to 1938, something amazing happened. And that was two gentlemen got together at Stanford University, Bill Hewlett and David Packard, and they formed this little company called HP. Okay, with a little bit of money from one of their professors. He gave them $1,000 to kind of get their company started. And they started this company in a garage. That's pretty much how a lot of Silicon Valley companies get started. They get started in people's garages, right? Because it's a big empty space, except for me, my garage is just full of computers, by the way. And most people's garages are full of empty computers in the Valley too, so I'm not unusual. But so yeah, they started a company in a garage, and kind of things got better and better and better. And there's actually a plaque in front of the garage, as you can see. So kind of, and that's not really true. I mean, I wouldn't say that's the beginning of it, but it's certainly one of the components of Silicon Valley. Again, it's not one event that started Silicon Valley, but a bunch of things came together and coalesced to create this kind of picture, okay? So remember, it's not just one thing. Okay, and so in 1938, one of the seeds was planted, okay, for the valley to get started. But as you know, seeds require fertilizer and companies require money, and so the money would come later, all right? So year now is 1943, and the date is now September the 10th, 1943, and this company, who the younger people in this audience would have never heard of, IBM. Have you heard of IBM? Oh, well, can you stand up, please? Thank you. Okay. I take back what I said. But I think if you go to a high school today, okay, and ask, you know, the kids there, have you heard of IBM? Probably would hear no, right? But again, you know, back in the day, back in my day, you can sit down, thank you. Back in my day, IBM was pretty much, I mean, synonymous with computers. So anyways, they came to Silicon Valley in 1943, and they basically, long story short, they basically invented the hard drive there called a RAMAC 305, which pretty much the disk platter was about yay high, and I think it had like 25 or 50 disks on it, and it held 5 million bytes of information. And you'll actually see a picture of it. It's pretty neat later on. Another company that started, and obviously kind of obscure now, called Ampex, and they brought magnetic tape to Silicon Valley, which is obviously important if you want to do computers, right? And so they did magnetic tape, videotape, a bunch of things that are obviously on tape and magnetic. Another thing that happened, and this is kind of, I'm going to kind of do little asides here and just kind of comment on what if. Okay, so SRI, again, where I mentioned Doug Engelbart invented the mouse and the hyperlink and Windows and that kind of thing. So SRI was pretty much took over an old Army medical facility that was supposed to receive wounded from the invasion of Japan, okay? And in fact, if the atomic bomb would not have worked and they invaded Japan, they were waiting for pretty much 250,000 casualties, okay? Right? And so because I think the ratio is like, you know, 10 to 1, you have 1 dead soldier and then 10 wounded soldier, something in that range. So they were expecting 250,000 casualties. So they had this huge, they built before obviously the invasion was going to take place because they want to have everything ready for the invasion. So they built this huge facility not far from Stanford University, and luckily they never had to use it. So they had all these buildings there, this land, so what do you do with it? So the Navy pretty much gave it to, or so the Army gave it to Stanford, and Stanford said, okay, let's turn this into a big research lab or research facility. And that's pretty much how SRI got started. And by the way, it's in Menlo Park, so if you're ever in California, I encourage you to visit it. It's really cool. They have a little museum, they have the first mouse and a bunch of stuff too. It's really neat. Okay, so later is 1947, and something really important happened as far as computers are concerned. This device called a transistor was invented at Bell Labs in Murrayville, New Jersey, by 3 gentlemen, Shockley, Bardeen, and Bratton. Now, the latter two would really play a role in the Silicon Valley, but the first person, Shockley, certainly did. So, the year is 1948. Varian Associates is born in Silicon Valley. Again, not too many people know who they are, but they did a lot of kind of technical instruments and gas chromatographs, a lot of technology, kind of like what HP kind of did in the 60s and 70s, Varian did before then. And so again, they needed a lot of the components that were being generated by a lot of companies in Silicon Valley, including the transistor later on. Okay, so here's 1952. So you're looking at 5 megabytes of storage, okay? So this thing weighs about 5 tons. The air conditioning, the electricity utilization of this thing is just off the scale. And so that was the first product that came out of the San Jose Research Lab that I just told you about that was established in San Jose a few years earlier, okay? So that was pretty much the output. And if you consider looking at that, and if I had one, I should have brought it with me, but in my little finger, just pretend I have a 1 terabyte micro SD card, okay? So we went from that to this, which is 12 orders of magnitude. So what in anybody's experience has gotten better by 12 orders of magnitude? Like there's nothing like that. So again, we've been witnessing some just incredible things happening. So as I mentioned, actually, hold on a minute, here it is. Okay, so there's a micro SD card. So just the comparison in size is extraordinary. Okay, so something really, really amazing happened in 1955 that has something to do with my computer over here. You can see what I'm doing here. And this gentleman was born. I don't know if you know him. His name is Stephen Paul Jobs. And he was born in San Francisco in 1955, and he did some things later on. I can't remember what they were, but I heard they were pretty important. So 1956, okay, so the Valley of Heart's Delight started to change at this point. So things were starting to happen, okay? The fire was lit, but certainly the tinder was there, and the logs were starting to be, put on the bonfire there, but the spark had not quite happened. Mainly because you needed two things. You need the silicon, okay, and you needed the money. So when the silicon and the money got together, that's when things really started to kind of kick off. And what really brought the money to Silicon Valley, which is interesting because the silicon and the money kind of arrived roughly around the same time, okay? So how many of you heard about the Polaris missile program? Okay, good. So it was the very first sea-launched nuclear ballistic missile. And again, I'm doing a little side here. So Edward Teller, who was at Lawrence, so I also do work at Lawrence Berkeley Labs, but there's a Lawrence Livermore Labs about 40 miles away to the south of where my lab is. And he said to the folks at the Navy that he could build a nuclear weapon about the size of a bread box, okay? And that could be put on the tip of a missile and launched towards Russia. And that if they would just build a missile, they could have a sea-launched ballistic missile that would basically work, and it would have a yield of something like 600 kilotons, which is substantially larger than Hiroshima was. And so, kind of thanks to Edward Teller, the Navy Department decided to invest in the Polaris missile program, and they basically gave, that's what I'm moving forward here. Oh, here we go. Yeah, and they gave the contract to Lockheed, which I'll kind of go talk about just after this. So right after that happened, basically, the silicon came to Silicon Valley. So why? Because Shockley's mom lived in Santa Clara. So Shockley was obviously out in New Jersey at Bell Labs, and he wanted to start his own company called Shockley Semiconductor. And so people asked, so why did he come to Silicon Valley? Because his mom lived there, so he wanted to be close to his mom. So it had nothing to do with the technology. He just came because his mom lived there, and the weather was nice, and said, well, I've been out to the East Coast, so let's go to the West Coast and set up a company there. So basically, if it wasn't for Shockley's mom, Shockley would have gone maybe somewhere else, perhaps. So just kind of another kind of coincidence. Okay, so in 1956, he set up Shockley Semiconductor Laboratories, and obviously that brought the silicon to Silicon Valley. And there's a plaque right where the building used to stand. It's gone now, but it used to be this kind of nondescript, kind of just warehousing kind of a building. You just drive by it and never notice it. Another thing that Shockley did, which again just adds more kind of logs to the fire, as it were, was he invited a bunch of really, really smart young researchers to his company. Gordon Moore and Robert Noyce, and the other folks, let me see, where is Kleiner? Eugene Kleiner's did a venture capital company, and they're on Sand Hill Road, and the other folks I can talk about, but let's just talk about Noyce and Moore. So obviously Moore's Law. So all these guys were in their late 20s, early 30s at the time, and he brought all these guys to Silicon Valley, which pretty much later on you'd see the impact of that. It was pretty significant. So again, here are the names. this is the way the company looked like. It's just like, it almost looks like a cheap like dollar store. I mean, again, it's just totally like shoestring operation. But what happened in '57 is Shockley won the Nobel Prize, and that kind of changed everything. It changed everything in not the way that you would think of. It changed everything because Shockley turned into a monster. Okay, so you can imagine you have this like older gentleman with a Nobel Prize, all these like young kids, right? And well, he became very full of himself, and everybody else below him was stupid, all right? At least that's what he thought. And so that really kind of alienated the, quote, the treacherous eight as they were designated by him. And they just got completely pissed off, and they quit. And so, like I said, he called them the treacherous eight, which is sort of a kind of historical remnant that everybody kind of calls them down over there. So that's, that kind of came from Shockley. So, we were talking about the silicon, so we know about that. We talked about briefly about the money as far as the Polaris missile program. And so in '56, Lockheed Missiles Division got the contract to build a Polaris missile system. And they moved from Van Nuys, Los Angeles, where they could have stayed, okay? They could have stayed there. But no, they didn't. They came to Mountain View, and they set up shop right next to Moffett Field, which now is NASA Ames, but at the time was Moffett Field. And so, so that was a hell of a coincidence, right? So now you've got this high-tech defense company. You have Shockley, you have HP, and a few other companies, you have IBM, and now they're all within like walking distance from one another, pretty much, right? And you're going to ask me, so what does Silicon Valley computers and all that kind of stuff have to do with like missiles and things like that? Well, missiles need something called a guidance system. So they didn't have GPS, they didn't have satellites back in the 1950s. So you had to build a computer that knew where it was, knew how to go on a ballistic trajectory to get to its target and hit its target within 1 mile of accuracy. And you need a lot of, you get a lot of computers to do that, a lot of computer technology to do that, not a lot of computers, but technology, to steer those fins, get that rocket to its target. And so Lockheed came to the right place for that. And Lockheed brought bags and bags of money, okay, which again, if you've got companies and you've got money, that's a good thing. All right, so Lockheed's new facility, again, was set up right next to Moffett Field, which kind of made sense because, Moffett Field was run by the Navy, and the Polaris missile program was a Navy-run program, so it kind of made sense, right? So they were not like dumb. So the specs for the missile pretty much was using the W-58 warhead, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, and it had a yield of 200 kilotons, which is 10 times the Hiroshima bomb was. Okay, so that was the spec. And Shockley and later on Fairchild made a lot of components for the guidance system, not just on the missile, but on the submarine, because the submarine also needs to know where it was. Right, you're under the water, right? You need to kind of keep track of where you are, and hence the guidance system. In fact, the same technology was also used for the Apollo program, okay? And Fairchild, which I'll talk about in a second, Fairchild pretty much grew out of Shockley Semiconductor because, again, that treacherous data I talked to you about left Shockley and started Fairchild, which I'll briefly talk about here. But pretty much that's what the guidance system looks like. It's all computer controlled, transistor-based technology. By the way, this thing here is the gyroscope, 3-axis gyroscope, and accelerometer. So it's pretty much everything you need to go to the moon in the late 50s. Obviously, the moon program had a little bit more to it, but essentially the foundations were there. Another thing, also, by the way, that was kind of nifty to have in the area was having two world-class universities. So having Stanford and Berkeley, again, within walking distance, at least Stanford. I mean, Berkeley's about 30 kilometers away, but I mean, you can take the bus, not a big deal. So 30 kilometers away is not that far away. And again, two world-class universities that today, I think, combined have a total of over 100 Nobel Prizes. Okay, so not bad. Okay, so in today's dollars, the missile program poured in about $22 billion back in the day. Okay, so that was the first infusion of a huge amount of cash. Of course, all that cash went to Silicon Valley companies, such as the company that these gentlemen founded, all kind of, or many of them kind of outcasts from Shockley, and they founded Fairchild Semiconductor. Okay, and so again, kind of a nicer building, a little more modern, even looks kind of neat today. So again, this is 1958, right? And so this is the company, this is the very first building they moved into, and they started to make transistors. And then one of the founders had this. So in 1958, by the way, NASA was also formed. I just want to, this is going chronologically, so I just have to kind of throw this in here. On October 1st, 1958, Moffett Field was renamed to NASA Ames Research Center in preparation for the moon program and the manned space program. And about 50 years later, I gave a talk there on some of the research I'm doing on, I built this computerized imaging microscope system, and I was giving a talk to the Life Sciences Division there at NASA, so that kind of even affected me, so it's pretty cool in that way. So in 1959, something kind of amazing happened, and that was the invention of the integrated circuit at Fairchild. And I don't know if you know, but the integrated circuit has played a pretty important role in computers. And so Robert Noyce invented it in January '59, and obviously that's kind of when things really started to kind of change. And again, there's a plaque there in front of the building, which I showed you before, that one-looking building, and that's pretty much where the IC was invented. And so I would say kind of at that point, things really kind of got going. I would almost say that's sort of the kind of the spark now that lights the fire, that basically turned this agricultural community into Silicon Valley. Okay, but again, there's a lot more to the story. That could have just fizzled out. Okay, but in order to kind of have a robust, continuous, I guess, influence like Silicon Valley has, you need a big foundation. Okay, and so that's coming. So when Kennedy gave his talk about going to the moon in '62, that's when the money really started to pour in to the Bay Area. Okay, because again, the computers that you needed for that program were just they were everywhere in the manufacturing of the equipment and so on and so forth. So it was pretty important that Silicon Valley was there to supply all that equipment. And again, of course, NASA Ames played an important part. The integrated circuits that were in the guidance computer of the Apollo mission were made at Fairchild, and here's an example of it. And I think that is a 3-input NOR gate. And that's pretty much all the computer had, was these 3-input NOR gates, and that's what they built the entire system out of. It's pretty neat. Okay, so year is 1965 now, and I don't know if you've heard of Moore's Law, but Moore's Law was founded or came up by Gordon Moore, and basically it says that every 24 months the number of transistors on a chip will double, and that pretty much is held true up until today, and hopefully will continue into the future. So again, we're at 1967 now, and Steve Jobs makes a really important telephone call to Bill Hewlett at Hewlett-Packard, wanting to get some information on a frequency counter. And that's kind of what happened was Bill actually invited Steve over to Hewlett-Packard as an intern for a summer job. So that's kind of how Steve got interested in electronics and so on and so forth. And his kind of introduction to Silicon Valley. So Steve kind of goes back pretty far in the history books. It wasn't just the Apple, he got started for Europe. And he also did this thing called Blue Box back in the day, which you could make free telephone calls anywhere in the world. This is way before touch tone. Most people had touch tone telephones, we were still using rotary, but he actually made a box that would pretend to be a telephone and a telephone switching system that would allow him to make calls anywhere, so which was pretty cool. Okay, so we're at March 16/8, and again, Hewlett-Packard makes this sort of personal computer. It was called the HP 9100A. I wouldn't really call it a personal computer, but you could do like basically rudimentary programs, and it pretty much cost a million. This is 1968, don't forget. So we're in May '68 now, and Moore and Noyce decided to form this new company, okay? And they basically left Fairchild and started this company called Intel. And not just Moore and Noyce left, but a bunch of other people left, and the companies that were formed are sort of listed over here. I think we're familiar with AMD, Zilog, maybe not so much, that's kind of an older kind of a chip manufacturer. But Kleiner Perkins, again, they're still a pretty significant venture capital company out in Silicon Valley. And again, in July '68, Intel was founded by Moore and Noyce. And let me see, something else happened in '68 towards the end of it, and this is where the introduction of the mouse, the whole basically, what I'm still using today. So this user interface that I'm using today was pretty much invented in '68. So, you know, I don't use trackpads, but it's pretty much mimicking a mouse. The Windows, hyperlinks, that whole thing. And the talk was given at the San Francisco Auditorium by a gentleman by the name of Doug Engelbart from SRI. And here is a picture of it. And he was doing it live, and he was doing a Zoom meeting in '68 with one of his collaborators back at SRI. So the talk was given in San Francisco with a video chat. You can actually see it. He's got the video imposed with the output of the computer. So it was completely revolutionary. And obviously, nobody paid attention to it because, well, right, we've been starting to use video chat like not too long ago, right? Maybe 10 years went out using it seriously. So it took a long, long time for people to kind of really accept that technology. So anyways, that was kind of seminal. So again, here's some of the things that came out of it, and obviously all these technologies were ripped off by another company or research facility in Palo Alto called Xerox PARC, and I'll touch on that shortly. So the future of computers had been revealed, and again, we're still using the technology today. And in '68, at least the end of '68 in December, that's when our ICs went to the moon, okay, on Apollo 8. And then soon after that, let's see, they landed on the moon, okay, with Apollo 11. And so basically, computer technology in the form of integrated circuits and transistors basically was on the moon in '69. So another really kind of important thing happened in '69 as well. In fact, something amazing, something like really amazing, and it was called the ARPANET. So not too many people know that the internet, or the World Wide Web as we call it now, it's called the internet, and prior to that it was called the ARPANET, but it was actually created in California. And in fact, one of the nodes, there were actually only 2 nodes on the internet now, I think there's more than 2, right, Mike, today? Nodes?
Oh, yeah.
A little more. A couple of orders of magnitude. Actually, I'm not sure if it's 12, but it's a lot. Actually, it could be 12. So yeah, that's another thing that kind of just added zeros and zeros and zeros. It wasn't just like memory capable, it's the number of nodes in the internet just went crazy. And so the 2 nodes were SRI, which I mentioned before, where Doug Engelbart worked, and where he basically invented all that technology, the mouse, the Windows, the hyperlink, all that kind of stuff. And then the other node was UCLA. So again, the internet was invented in California, which is pretty cool. So again, the ARPANET became the internet, and it became the World Wide Web, and so on and so forth. So year's 1970 now, and by the way, chip geometries are an amazingly small 10 microns. I think they're smaller now, right? And so in 1970, as I was mentioning before about Xerox PARC, Xerox PARC was founded, and by a photocopier company. Again, younger people don't even know what a photocopier is, I'm just kidding, but I'm sure you haven't really used one. So Xerox was basically a photocopier company. They had paper, you'd make a copy of what was on the paper, and that was wonderful. They were making tons and tons of money. But somebody had the brilliant idea, said, hey, maybe in the future people won't use paper, everything will be paperless, and we'll have this thing called a paperless office, right? Imagine that. And they said, well, if we know what's going to happen and we get on board really quickly, we could just basically blow the competition away because they don't know what's going to happen, we do, right? So that's exactly what they decided to do. They decided, okay, well, you're right, and we need to do this research company invent the future, okay? And that's exactly what they did. So they basically, they built this beautiful facility. Again, if you go to Silicon Valley, I really, really encourage you to visit Xerox PARC. It's an amazing building itself. It's basically on this slope, and it's terraced. Okay, so the buildings are kind of, as the slope goes down, they basically just keep on going down the hill, and they actually have plants on the side. I mean, it's just like, if you want to do research and not be bothered, just do your thing. And by the way, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's like in this big field. There's no distraction, so you could like work there till 3 o'clock in the morning and then even notice it. It's just the ideal place. And again, they made it really kind of comfortable for the researchers. You know, bean bags, and bring your bike, and you know, your Birkenstocks, and do what you just invent the future. I don't care what you look like or what you do. I don't care. Just invent the future. That's what their mandate was. And so, not only off the street, as it were, but they also stole on where they got all those ideas from. And basically, 3 years. It took them about 3 years to pretty much come up with the prototypical device that we're pretty much using the same technology, the same paradigm today is the desktop. Okay. So right now it is January '71. Okay, and the name Silicon Valley is coined and becomes by a guy called Don Hoffler, and he basically coined the word Silicon Valley. So that's kind of when Silicon Valley really got its name officially in 1971. Okay. Also in '71, another gentleman at Intel creates the very, very first microprocessor in the form of the Intel 4004. And so he put pretty much everything that would be on a rack-mounted system now on a chip. Now it was only a 4-bit computer, right? But I mean, it was a computer on a chip, which was pretty amazing. And so he pretty much was the father of the microprocessor. And so it ran at a blistering 740 kilohertz. And yeah, it's a lot, huh? And it had 2,250 transistors and used 10 micro technology. But hey, it was a microprocessor, and it was a computer on a chip, which is pretty neat. So something really amazing happened in the summer of '71. What is it? Oh yeah, so Steve Jobs met Steve Wozniak, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's pretty cool, pretty important. Planet Perkins got together to do a little VC work. Sequoia Capital, likewise, did the same thing, a little VC work. You kind of need VCs, right, for technology startups and so on. So now you're really getting the fun. So you see where we're going now. We're getting the foundation. We get the money. It's now entrenched. They're on Sand Hill Drive. You got these tech companies who need the money, and so and obviously these VCs are being hooked up with the folks in New York City, right, to do the IPOs. So that whole web of infrastructure, of money, technology, and marketing is all getting kind of built now. Okay, and Silicon Valley is starting to become Silicon Valley. So just a little bit of statistical stuff. So in 2020, Silicon Valley startups attracted $63 billion worth of VC funding. So the money was there. In '72, the very first supercomputer came to the Valley in the form of the Iliad 4, which was installed at NASA Ames. So thank you, NASA Ames, again. You're coming and making an important contribution to the Valley here. It cost a lot of money. It cost $31 million, and back in the day it was a lot of money. Had 64 FPUs and 4 CPUs, which back then it was pretty extraordinary. And it worked until 1981. So now we're at '72. We have the 8-bit version of the 4004, okay? Also using the same geometry, 10 microns, but it had 3,500 transistors, a little bit more. Okay, so here we go. Something amazing is going to happen. What's it going to be? It's going to be the Alto computers. Okay, so today is 2023, and in 1973, again, my technology was invented, or the technology on everybody's computer. The desktop, the icon, the Windows, the whole spiel, it's there. So 1973, pretty much, we've been using the same thing since then. And also the concept of a personal computer. Okay, so, I mean, obviously, in '73, most computers were shared by a bunch of people, but in that environment, it was pretty much your computer. You did whatever you want with it. It was not a desktop, but a desktop computer. So had the graphical user interface, pretty much everything that we're used to today. So again, here's some of the technologies: the mouse, the GUI, the Windows, the Ethernet, the shared files, the WYSIWYG, the bitmap display. And also, don't forget the laser printer, which is pretty much an anachronism today, but it was pretty cool back then. So we're at 74 now using amazing 6-micron technology, and along comes the 8080, which was pretty much the first microprocessor that was put into the very first microcomputer. So if you remember the Insight 8080 or the Altair, that was the first chip that was in those very first proto microcomputers. So we're back in, in 75 now, December, and here it is. Here's the Insight 8080, which was one of the very first microcomputers. There was the Altair that came out in the same year, but if those old enough to remember when that came out, and unfortunately I remember quite well, it was revolutionary. But if you compare what came out just shortly afterwards, so this is 75, so if you compare what came out in 77, which is just 2 years later, it pretty much turns this into a dinosaur. And by the way, that computer is being sold at the very first computer store that was in Mountain View, California, where Steve Jobs, by the way, sold the very first Apple I motherboards, right? And so that was all the byte shop in Mountain View. So again, all the places, the people, all these things are happening in a very, very small area, okay? So the date now is April 1st, April Fool's Day, 1976, and guess what? Yes, another garage, another company, okay? By the way, my house has the exact same paint scheme as that. That's kind of weird. It's this kind of like beigey thing with a blue trim. And in fact, that's kind of what my house looks like. It's kind of a ranch style house, and Silicon Valley, almost every house kind of looks like that, by the way. Except sometimes the garage is on the right-hand side, sometimes the left-hand side. It's, yeah, pretty cookie cutter. So here's that motherboard I was talking to you about. So this was sold at the byte shop for, I think, $606.66. By the way, that's Steve Jobs, by the way, did that, a little sense of humor. And so along comes 1977, and yes, the Insight 8080 that you saw before is completely blown out of the water because the Apple II is an actual computer pretty much anybody can use, right? It's got color, graphics, it has the built-in basic operating system in the ROM, right? It's pretty much plug and play, quite literally. You plug it in, and the prompt comes up, and you're ready to go. There's no soldering, there's no nothing. It's just like you go and start programming, okay? So, in fact, this was the very first computer I ever programmed, and my very first computer program, I'll never forget, was 2 lines of code, print hello, okay, sorry, it was like 10, right, it was basic, you have to have line numbers, right? So it was 10, print hello, line 20, go to 10, okay? It's really cool, so it print hello along. And that was my very first computer program. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And so yeah, that's a little bit of my history. Okay, so here we are at 78, and how are we doing on time? We're almost done. So yeah, we're gonna get done real quick. So 78, Bill Joy does Unix BSD at Berkeley, yay Berkeley. 78, we're doing the 8086, which goes into the IBM PC. 79, 8088, 86 are now out there, and then which eventually go into the IBM PC, which comes out in 81. Steve Jobs goes to Xerox PARC and sees the future and pretty much rips off everything. Okay, his mind explodes and sees the Alto, the Windows, the whole schmeal, the laser printer, everything, and pretty much decides to change the world. And that's kind of what we're the Apple Macintosh, but again, pretty much roughly the same operating system I'm using right now with a little bit of jazz in there. Oh yeah, by the way, here we go. You've now seen you've now seen 201 slides, and yeah, we're pretty much done. Okay, but there is just one more thing. I think it's my last slide. Okay, so Canada's GDP is $1.9 trillion. Apple is worth $2.3 trillion. Google is worth $1.7 trillion. NVIDIA is $1.2 trillion. And you get the picture, right? I mean, and that's all within a 30 square kilometer area. Unbelievable. And yeah, that's the end. So again, in Florence, like what I did today, there's a lot more. I'll just kind of, there it is, look at that. Okay, no, we're not gonna do that. We're done. Okay. All right, that's it. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. My big takeaway was, again, the Polaris missile program I told you, I was really kind of used a lot of technologies that were being invented in Silicon Valley. And I think really that also brought the money into the technology, and if it wasn't for that, I think things could have been different. But anyways, also the fact that one other thing too, a lot of this is built on kind of just chance, right? So let's say Shockley's mom lived in somewhere else, lived in Florida perhaps, Boca Raton, let's say, right? Boca Raton's a very nice place, right? Could have gone up there. What if Shockley didn't turn out to be an idiot? What if he was like, the Nobel Prize became magnanimous and humble, like some people become, right? Instead, he alienated all his engineers, they left and they started these companies. What if that didn't happen? So I think a lot of it was pretty much chance, but it's a very lucky place because a lot of very lucky people that go there and do some amazing things. So anyway, so that's my talk. If you have any questions, please, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, like you kind of mentioned, like there's like this whole thing came out of like a sort of convergence of say financial interests and military bodies,
Yeah.
and so on. You
Yeah.
mentioned chance as well.
And so what was the last thing you said? Chance, yeah, yeah.
But like also you had say the '60s counterculture, so you had 2007 community memory.
And I didn't even touch about
all that.
I didn't touch about that, but you're so right. The 60s counterculture played a huge role too, right? Because it was just bucking authority, bucking pretty much every, do your own thing. It was like, there wasn't any rigid structure, so pretty much people didn't have people really thought out of the box. And by the way, if you notice the folks at Xerox Park, those guys were all hippies. But no, they were, yes.
So,
I know some.
Looking at this place, like even like Blackberry, like if you come out of the vacuum, there's something that laid the ground for it.
Well, University of Waterloo was
Is it those same factors, or do you see like what are the parallels between a place like this? Like,
No, I see a huge parallel. I mean, BlackBerry is pretty much what happened there, but unfortunately happened there like thousands of times. And so, another thing I realized, and this is just kind of going back on that, and the same thing could happen here. I mean, it almost did, right? I mean, at BlackBerry, things could have been different, right? So maybe Steve Jobs, he would have had a BlackBerry, and maybe he would have liked it. Imagine if Steve Jobs would have liked his BlackBerry, right? And he would have said, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread. There's no way that we could do anything better than that, right? Right? I mean, that could have happened too, right? But, I mean, it didn't. And so that's a possibility. Also, what could have happened is just maybe Lazaridis would have pissed off a lot of engineers. They would have left and formed a bunch of smaller companies, did really well. Because I mean, at the time, BlackBerry was a very valuable company, and the employees had a lot of stock, which means they had a lot of money. So if things would have gone differently, the same thing could have happened, is that the treacherous A could have been a treacherous whatever here, and they could have just, right? So I'm not gonna say a lot of it is luck, but luck is don't deny luck. That's the thing, right? It does make a difference, yeah. Yeah.
Xerox Park specifically assembled one of the best computer science bunch in the world.
Yeah, sure did.
But they didn't know what the hell to do.
Oh, I forgot to mention that, yeah. So, yeah, that's a very good point. So, in the late 60s, like 69, 70 time frame, again, somebody in Rochester, New York, right, because that's where Xerox was based. Originally, by the way, it was called the American Halide Corporation. So there was this guy, and he invented the photocopier, and he went to IBM and said, hey, I've got this photocopier, because you're international business machines, right, so photocopier. And IBM said to him, no, I don't think anybody would want to make a photocopier of something, would they? No, I'm not interested. They went to General Electric, same thing. No, photocopier? No, I don't know what will work. And then he went to this other company, I can't remember what it was. I think actually it was the American Halide Company. And they said, yeah, that sounds kind of cool, and we'll change our name to Xerox. And I think Xerox means something along the lines of copying or whatever it is. And the rest is history. So yeah, so then they decided, yeah, well, paper's got a limited lifespan, and everything would be digital, so they did Xerox Park. And then, and that's really funny because they did it. I mean, it's amazing what they did. And then they did a dog and pony show for it's kind of like, it's funny how things work. They did a dog and pony show for people in Rochester, and they said, no, nobody would want to do that. I mean, email? No, I have this beautiful secretary that does my memos and emails. I mean, I don't want to get rid of her, right? And Windows and a mouse. Who would want to have something called a mouse? I mean, like those are like rodents, right? I mean, do you want a rodent on? I mean, these are the kind of things that they said. Who would want a rodent on their desk? I'm not kidding, right? True story.
They created two things. One was called PostScript, which turned into
Adobe.
Called Adobe.
Yeah. By the way, they're worth a couple of dollars too. By the way, market cap Adobe's worth something.
And another one that's called Ethernet, and I think it's now called Cisco.
Actually, I met Bob Metcalf, and I'll talk to Lawrence about this, but I have a lot of friends in Silicon Valley. And by the way, it's funny, during when Trump was president, they were all asking me, Steve, I mean, I know you're Canadian, but could you pull some strings for me and so we can get up there if things really go south? No, I'm serious. They were saying, how do I become a Canadian citizen? And I think actually, I don't
They crashed
They
the immigration's web servers, like, during that period of time, they had so many applicants come in, they crashed the service.
That's a true story what Mike's just said, absolutely. So I was getting calls from my friends, yeah, so anyways, I'm sorry, I got off to a tangent, how did I do that? Oh yeah, so, right, yeah. So if you guys want to, like Bob Metcalf, for example, I forgot to bring this. So I have a 3-com network card with his signature on it. And so so let me know if you want some folks and we can work something out, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, long story short, the Xerox executives in Rochester said it's a stupid idea. Just go back to California. That's where the fruits and nuts are, by the way, California, right? But that comes from the Valley of Heart's Delight. So there's a reason why they call it fruits and nuts, because that's what we did back in the day, right? Fruits and nuts. And so they said, go back there and just don't bother us, just do your thing and whatever, right? So the same thing happened to Xerox as what the adventure of the copy machine kind of got from IBM and GE. In fact, there's a great book called Fumbling the Future. I really encourage you to read it. It's about the whole story. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
So obviously, for us, we're working for a company in Toronto, and we did a bunch of OEM stuff. We were talking to Xerox because we did stuff that generated forms at the time, and that's quite early in the game. And anyway, they had a bunch of people from the different divisions, and we were having this talk. And the reason why they're interested is because, well, they did printers, and this form generation would be used in printers, copiers, the same thing, fax machine. So they had a lot of different technology there. And I remember just for fun asking them once at lunch thing, how come you guys don't do something where you can integrate your photocopier and your printers together and so on? And one of the guys stopped back and he said, Xerox is a very interesting company. It's really big and it's like a huge ship in a narrow lake and you can't turn it so easily. He said the problem is you can't, if one division makes a product that steps on the toes of the other division, it's not just the stepping on the toes issue, it's a financial issue because you have huge investments in this long stream of products that are going out your doors. And the thing I learned is very hard for a large company to navigate into change agilely. And one of the things that happened in Silicon Valley is a lot of these companies where the people left and started the company was because they had an idea that the company they were in couldn't do because they were so busy doing other stuff.
It's called bureaucracy.
Right. And so they were able to go and start something that was focused on something they thought was a good idea. And a lot of people were doing that. And that's why these really small companies became like the Goliath in the field.
My friend with the IBM shirt on, I think IBM did a survey that it would take them 6 months to ship an empty box.
Right.
No, really, I mean, so there's this product called Air. Okay, IBM invented Air, so now we need to ship it. And to get through the whole bureaucracy, the part number, the warehouse, the salespeople, the whole deal, right? To get the salespeople up to speed. We're selling Air, guys, okay, so, training. I mean, literally it would take them 6 months to ship a box of Air. Okay, so, I mean, right, I mean, so these small companies like Apple, perhaps, I mean, they were just running circles around these people with, I mean, it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, because they didn't have all those financial investments that they had to pay off and worry about products, causing other products to lose money and so on.
I mean, and the thing that big companies do have, I mean, huge advantage over small companies is they have the marketing. And that's kind of where the small companies really have that Achilles heel, right? They don't have the marketing.
Right.
But then again, if you have a killer app or you have a killer thing, then it should pretty much market itself, right? So that's kind of the workaround for having a great marketing, because like they said that IBM can sell anything, right? Because their sales force is amazing. But again, if your product is so good that people just want it, then that kind of...
Even IBM underestimated how many computers that personal computers they would sell.
Well,
in fact, just about all the computer companies that first came out, like when it was like Radio Shack or Apple or whatever, were really surprised by the number of orders they had.
yeah, no, the people at Burroughs and Digital and IBM asked them, like, why would a normal person actually want a computer? Like, what would they do with it? Because they're thinking about, like, I get it, right? Because they're thinking of assembler and like JCL. I mean, you're not gonna have like a housewife where like a 12-year-old do like, kicks or like, I mean, that doesn't mean, again, something for the younger kids, but like assembler programming an IBM 360, really? Like the housewife is gonna, I didn't have it here, but I think it was like in 73, I should actually have it in the presentation. Neiman Marcus is kind of like the, what's that really expensive store in Toronto, Holt Renfrew? What's like, right? Have you guys heard of Holt Renfrew? Or like, really kind of like, top of like, you buy, everything in the store is $1,000 and above, okay? Anyways, there's this company called Neiman Marcus in the United States, and they thought it'd be really cool to sell something called a kitchen computer. Okay, so it was basically based on a Honeywell computer, kind of like a PDP-8, okay, like flip switches, the whole deal, right? And the computer cost $10,000, and the housewife would get a 2-week training course on Honeywell assembler. So if 8 people came instead of 6 people to a party, she could do the recipe translations from like 2 ounces to like 1 ounce for the whatever she's making, right? So it was pretty ridiculous. So again, these types of things kind of, people saw that and thought it was like absolutely ridiculous that anybody would actually want to own their own computer. So clearly they're kind of wrong. So yeah.
Didn't the same thing happen with Steve Wozniak when they Apple One too?
Say that again, sorry?
Didn't Steve Wozniak also like corporation or something? And
Yeah.
the same thing happened with
Oh yeah.
And he couldn't sell it to them.
No, in fact, Steve Wozniak was, I think, part of his employment contract is that anything he came up with had to be shown to HP. So they would just either say, yeah, okay, we'll build it, or just go away, we don't care, right? And that's pretty much happened. And Steve Wozniak, by the way, both of them worked, that's another coincidence, by the way, both of them worked at HP, which is just another kind of a synergy thing, right? Just like I did a thing at NASA Ames, both Steves worked at Hewlett Packard, which is just this self-feeding kind of thing, right? So anyways, yeah, he brought the Apple One to HP and say, this is like, it's got like built-in BASIC and it's got everything, except of course you have to solder in. You'd have to solder in a few things like the power supply, the keyboard. I mean, it was like not exactly your mom's computer. But they said, nah, nobody would ever want anything like that, and just go away. So yeah, they're just, pretty much. So again, tell yourself or your young people, if you have a great idea and people say it's a stupid idea, that means it's probably a good idea because a lot of people don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so just, yeah.
And if you're lucky enough to still have an Apple One, it's probably worth $1 million.
It's worth a lot. I think they
I
only.
think that's what I've seen them go for.
I think they only made. I'm trying to think. They only made 50 boards.
I think it was 200.
Was it 200? Okay, so a small amount of boards. Yeah, so there's not a lot of them out there. In fact, one of them is in the Computer Museum in Mountain View, which by the way, I would encourage you to visit if you come out there. It's where the old Silicon Graphics building used to be. In fact, they donated it to the Computer Museum. So.
That'd be fun to go out to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is our last question. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so you have both experiences here and also in Berkeley and maybe in Stanford, and like compare this to schools.
Yeah.
Do you think the seed is more important or the soil is important? And by that point is like the seeds are our students. Like, do you think the students at Berkeley or Stanford are much more talented than us here?
No.
So.
No.
Like,
But they do have those, they have the connections. So, look, the folks here at Stanford, Berkeley, we're all just as smart as everybody. I mean, it's pretty much equivalent, right? I won't say that people they're not, right? But what they do have, as far as an advantage is concerned, is that all these companies basically just, coming over to the campus and just say, come over, for the summer or whatever. And so what they do an advantage over us here is they get a lot of work experience because a lot of them go to whatever Facebook or Apple or whatever have you to work in the summer on these little projects and they kind of see what's going on there. And how many of you have been to like Google or Facebook or any of these places? Like, I mean, those places are like literally like amusement parks for like software engineers. Okay, like I was at Facebook, and they have like 8 different restaurants with like they have Indian, they have Chinese, they have pizza, they have deli. I mean, they have every kind of food you can possibly imagine. They have every kind of exercise which you see. I mean, anything you want, they have. Okay, so from a point of view of attracting engineers, it's really tough to compete with that, right? Yeah, so that's another thing that they, not the universities per se, but the companies down there, and it's tough, it's really tough. And I'll just end it right now, because it's getting late here, but I want to say just one last thing. About 3 years ago, I kind of figured it out. I was waiting for a friend of mine in Mountain View, and I was across the street from a Starbucks, and I said to myself, the average price of a house in Mountain View is around like $2-3 million now, right? So if you go to a Starbucks in Mountain View, and you see 4 people sitting together at a table, that is a possible $1 trillion company that those guys are talking about. And that there's not a lot of places in the world where everybody at the table is a multi-millionaire because they live in the town where every house is worth millions and millions of dollars. And there's a group of 3 or 4 people that can start a company that will change the world. And that's why Silicon Valley will keep on being Silicon Valley, because it just has all the right ingredients. And there you go. Anyways, thank you for your time, and I hope you learned something today.